Well, good morning. Welcome to North Point's live stream. We are glad you're here. Friends and family, guests who have come here who are online with us, you're all welcome. I want you to make some comments, whether it's on YouTube or on Facebook. Let us know that you're here. But we just welcome you. We're glad that you're here this morning. First thing that I want to do today is to say Happy Mother's Day. You know, life, like the real experiences of people, have made me over the years really rethink how I celebrate these special days. Maybe Mother's Day more than any other. In the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 15, the Apostle Paul tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. I would say that the depth and the compassion of this command is pretty penetrating when we think of mothers. Now when we say Happy Mother's Day, it really comes packaged with sensitivity in ways that I didn't hear or see in my early years of growing up in the church. But for today, I want you to think about this. For every warm memory and feelings of love and thankfulness for the care and nurture of moms, the things that they give to us, we rejoice with those who rejoice. But for those who never knew their mother, for those who have been maybe deeply wounded by their mothers, for those who are grieving the loss of a mom right now, we want you to know we weep with you. For those whose load was lightened and hearts were warmed and tears were dried by moms who cried with us and cared for us, we rejoice with those who rejoice. But for those who still yearn to be mothers, or who are struggling today raising young children, or wrestling with their older adult children, or those whose marriages are in crisis and creating difficulty to be the kind of mom that you want to be, we weep with you. Because we weep with those who weep. And for those whose lives have been shaped and your character molded by your mom's example, her example of goodness and godliness, we rejoice with you. But for those who are feeling the loss of a mother or a child today, our hearts break with you in this day. So whether you are rejoicing or whether you are weeping today, may this day be full of the grace and mercy of God, and may He touch you deeply, even right now. I want to remind everybody who is here with us to go and get your bread and your juice, have it by your side, have it there in front of you, enough for everybody around your table at home to take communion just a little bit later. It has certainly become one of the highlights of our mornings in our online live stream, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. As you know, last week we decided to take a slower approach to opening our doors and getting back to meeting in person. And based on the conversations that I've had with people this week, you've definitely got some questions about what we are doing and how we are doing it. So I thought I'd take a few minutes and answer some of those questions. So this is now our public service announcement, kind of the more you know. And so I want you to check out some of the questions and some of the answers. Take a look.
So when is North Point going to reopen for business as usual on Sundays?
Wow, talk about asking the toughest question first. To be honest, we really don't have an answer yet. We just know that we're going to wait. We're going to listen to the authorities and then make the best possible decision for North Point. It's pretty obvious there are other churches out there that seem to be in a hurry to open up, and that is their business. But we just feel more comfortable going a little bit slower. So we're going to keep our doors closed through the end of May and wait for health officials to declare we have entered into phase 2 of the reopening process. Until then, we're going to constantly evaluate so that we can do what is in everybody's best interest, young and old. Anybody that would come through our doors at North Point, we want to give them the very best that we have. And so for now, we're just going to continue to wait, and we ask you to be patient.
When we get back together, how do we practice social distancing but still have it feel like the old North Point?
There are really two main reasons why we are not currently reopening. The first is a health and safety issue. We want to be confident that when our doors are opened, it will be safe for everyone, all the way down to our nursery, all the way up to older people. And we just want everybody to feel comfortable when they come here. But for us, the second reason why we are not reopening is really just as important as the first. Whenever we reopen, we want it to feel like North Point. I think people who are part of our body understand exactly what I am saying. We're not, going forward, we're really not exactly sure what that is going to mean or how we're going to do that. But as I think about it, putting out 25 chairs in our building, making sure they are each 6 feet apart, a 6-foot radius around each one, having online sign-ups to make sure that we have enough services and enough spaces for people to come back, and doing it on a first-come, first-served basis, passing out masks at the door for people to put on, and having bathroom monitors. Well, any way that I look at that, and those that we have been in conversation, that doesn't exactly feel like who we are. Not that we couldn't do it, because we certainly could. And if that's the long-term answer for church life here in our state going forward, then by all means, that's what we will do, and we will do it the very best we can. But if it's just a short-term answer and something that has to be endured for a little while, we think we would rather just wait this out just a little bit longer to see if what we do here on Sundays and in other days we are open can feel a whole lot more like who we are.
Will we keep live streaming our service after we go back to meeting in person?
Definitely. We think it's pretty awesome to be able to connect with new and old people when they can't be in here in person. I mean, it is really an amazing thing. And to be honest, I'm kind of a celebrity now. At least that's what my granddaughter thinks of me. So I got to roll with it. And so we're going to keep doing the online thing into the future, enjoying it, being creative with it, and trying our best to connect with anybody that cares to hear about Jesus through the ministry of North Point Christian Church. And I hope you'll do that whenever you're out of town also.
I like the new variety with communion bread and drinks. What will communion look like when we're all back together again?
Oh, Aaron, what a great question. This whole communion thing has been kind of fun, especially the being able to read and listen to what people are using for communion in their homes, since they don't have it provided for them like we normally do on a Sunday morning here at North Point. I hate to be kind of crass here, but I need to say it the way that it really is. I don't think that going back to letting people put their grimy little hands into a community plate full of bread or a tray full of plastic cups, I don't think we're going back to that. Not anytime soon, really not ever. Fact is, we probably shouldn't ever have been doing that all along. But that's another discussion for another time. Now, one option we'll have is those little pre-packaged juice and wafer bundles that you can get at the Christian bookstore or online. Maybe. They seem kind of sterile to me. I don't know. That could just be me. Another option is to bring your own. We'll probably have to talk about that. But if people start to bring ice chests into the auditorium, or leaving the service a little early to fire up their grills out in the parking lot during my sermon, we'll probably have to rethink that option. But you can count on this. No matter what, we will still be a body of Christians who take the Lord's Supper together on Sundays. And honestly, I can't wait to see how this one works out.
When we begin meeting in person again, how will we keep our kids safe?
I think this issue is by far the biggest deal that we are facing as a church family. There is no way we are going to put children or families at risk, any kind of risk, just so we can meet together. In order to do this, we are going to have more volunteers than we have ever had in the past for setup, for cleaning, for disinfecting before and after every use, to have proper protection and social distancing among children, as well as all of our regular teaching and supervision that we go through every Sunday. Honestly, it is going to be a huge job and something that we are taking very, very seriously. Now, we are fortunate. We are so fortunate to have Angela as our children's pastor and Simon as our youth pastor, overseeing all of children's and youth ministries. You can be confident that your kids are in the best of hands and getting the best of care. And so that whenever we reopen, whenever that time is, you can know with all confidence that your kids are being taken care of very well and are in good hands.
Hey Greg, I heard our North Point band's moving to Nashville to try to get famous.
You think when they go on tour they'll give all the North Point tickets?
They better.
I agree.
I wonder if Greg has some information that some of the rest of us are not privileged to have right now. All I can say is that now that our band has gone viral, our little secret here at North Point is definitely out of the bag. I wonder if there's room on a tour bus for a band chaplain. Yeah, moving on.
I really enjoyed watching the live stream videos from my recliner. Do you think we could get more comfortable furniture in the auditorium?
Truth be told, I'm actually pretty much okay with a BYOR. That's a bring your own recliner movement. Even though our seats are more than comfortable enough to put even the best of you to sleep during my sermon, because clearly it is not my sermon that is putting you to sleep. We care about your comfort. I mean, we really do. Jesus, on the other hand, that's another issue.
Will we still get to do hugs and handshakes when we get back together on Sundays?
Hey, this is a big one. It's quite possible that hugs and handshakes may end up being a cultural casualty of the Corona era. And as sad as it might be, we may have to come up with something new, a new plan for greeting each other on Sundays or whenever we see each other. And we may have to work at it a little bit. It may take some adjusting. In the meantime, though, I've been doing some thinking about this. You see, the fist bump, or even the elbow bump, it might end up being socially allowed, and so we may end up embracing that one. Chest bumps, on the other hand, probably should never be allowed in church, so we'll probably put the quash on those. It's probably a good thing, just saying. Hand signals may be the wave of the future. One of my favorites, going all the way back to my youth, has been the rock on. Growing up where I did, anybody could do that, and you'd kind of know what it meant. But it really ended up in the church, especially, getting some bad press because there were some who associated that with the sign of Satan, and so probably couldn't do that. And then when I moved here to Texas, I realized that was the hook 'em horns sign for the University of Texas. And unfortunately, we are an entirely bipartisan church, and so we probably ought to steer clear from favoring one college over another. So one that I've really been thinking about is one that comes a little bit from my culture of Southern California on the beach, and it comes from Hawaii. And it's this one right here. You kind of take your hands and do this and shake your hand a little bit, and it's called shaka. Shaka. And in Hawaiian, what that means, it's just a symbol of friendship. When you see somebody else, you do that, and you just know you're with a friend. It is also a statement of solidarity, like we are in this together. And then finally, one of the best parts about it is that when you show that anywhere, it's just a way of saying it's all good. It's all good. So we'll have to see how this one shakes out.
Will I be able to keep wearing my pajamas on Sunday morning when we come back to the building?
Thank you, Lester. Your image is now burned permanently into my subconscious. Look, if this is all it takes to get you all back in the building on a Sunday morning, you can all wear onesies as far as I'm concerned. We've already got a patent on Pajama Day for the Sunday closest to Christmas. We do that every year. Maybe we could just go ahead and become the Church of the Pajamas. That's a thought. Well, I hope that answers some of your burning questions about reopening. So hang in there. We'll get back to being ourselves again soon. That day will be here before you know it. Until then, it's all good. Well, I hope that helps. I think we're going to probably begin doing regular public service announcements, and I promise you that the next one will be shorter. Oh well. Let's consider something this morning. I was thinking this week about how a person goes about picking a church. And so one of the questions, at least on a deeper level, I think on a more shallow level, we look at what the building looks like, or how good the preacher is, or those kinds of things. And I'm not saying those aren't important. I think they are. But on a little bit deeper level, a couple of questions we ought to be asking ourselves are, what does this church actually emphasize? Do they emphasize everything that you are supposed to be doing? Or do they emphasize everything that God has done? You see, those are almost two opposite ends of the spectrum. We talk about living lives that are totally and completely devoted to God. But the real story is that God is fully devoted to us. That God pardons our past. That His mercies towards us are new every morning. There's no doubt that we are challenged both in Scripture and by good Bible teaching. We are challenged to love and to serve and to give, and those things are incredibly important. But it all begins with God first. The cross is where the enemy was defeated. The cross is where our new life was purchased. We cannot say this enough. It is our story. This is where it always begins. But there is actually middle ground that we live in. This middle ground, this space between what God has done and what we are to do. And it's a tension, and we can easily overemphasize the part of it that we are to be doing. But we still have to acknowledge that. One of the greatest parts about playing sports is the mental, psychological part of the game. You can see it the best, at least I did, in the pre-game pep talks that coaches give, or the halftime pep talks when they come in halfway through the game. And you've all seen movies, or if you've played a sport where there is this time in the middle of the game where the coach comes and just tries to fire you up to get back out there and finish the game. Coaches have become famous for their halftime talks, getting players fired up to play the game. And honestly, it's in some of those moments where good coaches seem to inspire players to do more than they ever dreamed they could. But the truth is, there is no matter how much rah-rah there is, and no matter how much psychological manipulation is taking place, or emotional inspiration, none of that can change an unprepared, undisciplined player. That's truth right there. The real need that we need to get players fired up to practice. fired up to practice. How many great players have quit because they didn't want to practice? How many potentially great musicians are out there in the world because they just didn't want to practice their skills, their finger drills, their vocal drills, in order to get better at what they were doing? How many people quit on the path to becoming a teacher because the education was too demanding? The testing required too much. How many potential doctors and lawyers are out there kind of littered on the pathway because they didn't have what it took to keep at it? Tradesmen. I remember what it was like growing up in my home where my father was a carpenter, and he would have apprentice carpenters who would come alongside him. And so many of them quit along the way because they felt like it was too demanding. Yeah, the determination to practice is where it's at. It's where we become inspirations to others. How many people fall short of their dreams because they wouldn't pay the price to work at it? You cannot emotionally fire up people to do something they haven't paid the price in advance to do. That's just the way that it is. I played football in high school. I played football in junior college. And I've told some of you this before. I hated practice. I hated being in the weight room. I really hated all of those parts that would have made me a much better player, especially in college, than I was. And so my football career ended in junior college, in large part because I was unwilling to keep getting better at the game that I really enjoyed playing, but I just didn't want to do it anymore. So that dream ended. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church in Ephesus way back in the first century, and there's a part of it in chapter 4 that to me, when I read it, it is as if he is bringing those young believers together and going, I need to inspire you right now not to go out and be followers of Jesus, but actually to pay the price for what it's going to take to be a follower of Jesus. Let me see if you see what I've learned in this passage. I'm going to read it for you. It's in Ephesians chapter 4, and I'll start reading at verse 1, and then I'll kind of skip down about the middle of that down to verse 11 in just a second. But I want you to follow along on the screen and read with me. He writes this: I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort. That's the effort is the part that we do. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Each one of us has received a special gift in proportion to what Christ has given. Now at verse 11, so it was Jesus himself who appointed the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So when I read that passage, and I have read it hundreds and hundreds of times in my life, here's what I hear. I hear the Apostle Paul saying, grow up. Get your act together. Take care of business in your spiritual life. What is the church all about? Why do we spend time together, whether it's online or in person or in studies or wherever? Why do we do that? The church gathers together to get ready to go out for the other 6 days. We gather together, we study the Word to grow and to be built up, to be equipped for service, to become confident in the truth, to be able to speak the truth in love, to grow together in unity, so that each member can do its part. You see, the church is about growing up. This is the space in between what God has done and what we are to go and do. That space in between is the church. There are no shortcuts. All of us, every one of us, need to travel the same tedious path of spiritual discipline. It doesn't happen any other way. Most of the time, I think we as the body of Christ end up looking a lot like students who want to look up the answers at the end of the book. You know, the math test where teachers say, well, we want you to take the test, and the answers really are in the back of the book, but don't look at the answers until you've really, really practiced and got the whole scheme of mathematics down and taken the test. I know students. I know myself. The urge to look at the back of the book and just write down the answers is inside of each one of us. Take a test, you might get lucky. You might get lucky and pass it. Live a life of faith, you don't get lucky at faith. That's not how it works. A life of faith is like a muscle. And that muscle gets developed over time. And it gets developed through practice. Guys, I don't know any other way of saying this, and I know it sounds a whole lot like, gosh, there's all this stuff I've got to do. I just want to rest in the grace of God and everything He's done for me. I get it. And that is true. But the life of faith, this path that we are on, this journey that we are on, is hard. It takes work to get through it. We long for a path that doesn't demand too much. We look for easy answers. We look for quick fixes. But unfortunately, quick fixes lead away from growth, not toward it. The discipline, the practice, prepares us for what is ahead. And there is no other way around it. Faith like we read in the Bible, faith like Noah's and Abraham's and Jacob's, and faith like Moses and Job, faith like that cannot be shaken because it is the result of having been shaken and grown through it, grown deeper through the learning of lessons. It's where God has proven himself to be faithful again and again on the path of discipline. So maybe in this season where everything has been turned upside down and schedules have been totally rearranged and our priorities have been challenged, maybe this will be the time that you decide to get back into the spiritual gym or back on the practice field of spiritual discipline and actually begin to work toward spiritual maturity. The kind of maturity that the Apostle Paul is calling us to, and the life Jesus lived as an example for each one of us to follow. Maybe, just maybe, this is the time where that can be happening for you. So make sure you have your communion bread and juice right now, enough for your family. Gather it around in front of you. If it's not there, run and get it right now. The word for communion in the first century language of the Bible was, it's a word that is deep and fascinating. It's where we get our English word fellowship or community. The word means sharing in common. The act of communion is the action that states we are all in this together. Back in my playing days, one of the main things that got me through the pain and the discipline of our daily practices in football was actually looking at my brothers, looking at them and seeing that they were sharing in the same struggle that I was sharing. And knowing that they were doing that with me, it actually inspired me to keep going when in my heart I wanted to quit. That's what communion does. Even though we are separate, we are still together. And even in the act of taking bread and taking juice, even in that act of participating in this simple little exercise, we are sharing life in common. We are realigning ourselves with each other for the task ahead of us, knowing that we do this together. So remember, as you eat the bread that represents Jesus' body that was given for you, and as you drink the juice that represents his blood shed for our redemption, the very thing that purchased for us this new life, remember that we don't do this alone. So take the Lord's Supper right now as you listen to this song.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. salvation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
Well, we have really been glad that you have been here with us today, and hope that you go away informed, maybe inspired, but certainly willing to live your lives dedicated to the God that loves you. As we close today, I want to share with you this historic priestly blessing that is found in the Old Testament book of Numbers. Let these words fill your heart as you go this week. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Until next week, see ya.
Creation rise and sing, all you angels sing, every nation sing, each generation sing. Sing praise, tell of all his wonderful acts. Sing praise, tell of all his wonderful acts. Families and nations we gather, his wonders, the world is established. Be refreshed from the wells of salvation. Give thanks, His goodness sing praise to Him, tell of all His wonderful acts. Sing to Him, sing praise to Him, tell of all His wonderful acts. Families of nations will gather, His wonders, the world is established. Be refreshed from the wells of salvation. Give thanks,
He is good. Sing to remember, oh, remember.
all that
Sing to remember, be refreshed from the wells of salvation. Give thanks,